My name is Dave Kozer. I'm the Director of Programs at the Community Foundation in Lancaster County. We're happy that some folks were able to join us from both our team and outside of our team in Lancaster. Deb Jones is here from United Way of Lancaster County. Oh, and Monica's joining now. She's from Berks County. So yeah, we're really excited about this opportunity to hear from PIC and from the PA is Ready initiative. It's just been, I don't know, Annalisa, how long have we known each other now? Probably 5 or 6 years. And
I think it's been 5 years, yeah.
Yeah, so a few years ago, the Community Foundation started talking with Philadelphia Foundation, and they were kind of part of this project. PA is Ready, and so we Annalisa and I talked, and we supported the project a little bit financially for a few years, and yeah, we're just really excited to continue to hear about the great work that the PIC is doing, with this initiative to support immigrants and refugees throughout the state of Pennsylvania, including in Lancaster County. So we're really looking forward to hearing about updates. What's their work entail? What do they actually do? What's changing in 2021? What looks different now than when we convened a session similar to this back in 2016, when it feels like that was a whole different world at that time. So yeah, just really excited to hear from everyone today. But before we get started, can we just kind of go around? It's a small enough group, I think, that we can just say our names, who we're with, which organization, and if you feel led to say a word about your interest in this this work, that's great, but don't feel obligated to do so. So I think I already did my spiel on my screen. Sundrop, you're on the left, top left, so go for it.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting us. My name is Sundrop Carter. I'm Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition. And you'll be hearing a lot from me, so I'm just going to keep it there so that you don't get a whole bunch of repetitive things about me. And I will pass it. Oh, let's see, where's Jessica? You are the next person on my screen.
Excellent. My name is Jessica Malhot. I am the Director of Forever Lancaster at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. So I work mostly with donors. So understanding what's going on in your world so that I can convey that to our donor group is really important. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say today. I will pass it to Terry Kreis.
Hi, I'm Terry. I am the office manager at the Community Foundation, and I pretty much communicate with anyone and everyone. And let's see, I'm looking, Deb's to my right.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Deb Jones. I'm a licensed social worker, and I'm the Director of Community Initiatives here at United Way of Lancaster County. I joined about 5 months ago, and one of the initiatives that we have invested in is helping our immigration and refugees that come into the community to be integrated and supported. And so that was part of a collective impact partnership that started 3 years ago, and we're invested in continuing to see that move forward and providing some supports. And I will kick it off to Aaron Spangler.
Hi, everybody. My name is Aaron Spangler. I'm the communications manager at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. I'm really just happy to be here and honored to be able to learn from you all today and excited to figure out how we can get more involved. I will pass it to Fran.
Hola, buenos días a todos. My name is Fran Rodriguez. I serve as Senior Program Officer with the Lancaster County Community Foundation. I work alongside Alma Felix and Dave Kozer and pretty much deal with all of our community benefit organizations and helping them to get ready to apply for grants and get involved with us. I'll pass it over to a friendly face, Megan Llerena.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Megan Jarena. I am the Executive Director of Make the Road Pennsylvania. I use she, her pronouns, and you'll be hearing from me later, so I'll leave it there. Thank you, Fran. I'll pass it to, well, she's not up. Monica?
Yes, hi. Sorry, I'm going to be driving in a bit, so I'm not joining through video. So my name is Monica Reyes, and I'm from the Berks County Community Foundation. We currently manage and work closely with GRIP, which is the Greater Reading Immigration Project. We manage the fund that provides scholarships for students with DACA status. I also have just a personal connection with the issue, so happy to be on the call and learn more about what each of you are doing in the community. I will pass it on to Tracy.
Great, thanks. Tracy Cutler, I'm Executive Vice President at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. Appreciate you being here, appreciate your work. Know it's a big piece of how we're going to continue to be successful as a state. So thanks for being here, and I will pass it to Alma.
Hi everyone, my name is Alma Felix and I'm a program officer at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. Just like Fran, I also work with grant programs and scholarships and volunteers, so I'm excited to be here. Terry, have you gone? Ashlyn?
I did not go yet. Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Ashlyn Maslin-Serrani. I am the Donor Services Officer at the Lancaster County Community Foundation, which means I get to work with Jessica and with our incredible donors and legacy givers, and also connect with development professionals in Lancaster through something called Developing Lancaster. It's a group for nonprofits, or we say community benefit organizations. My connection to this, one of them is kind of personal. My dad immigrated here and his entire family as well. My graduate research was in refugee children, their experience in the United States. And I had the privilege of talking with Annalisa and Saida and just learning more about the work. So I'm excited to hear more today and hopefully get to pass this on to our donors. I will pass it to Ahmet, who might be driving.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, I'll be stationary in just a minute. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ahmet. I'm with CARE Philadelphia as Education and Outreach Director. And my connection to Lancaster County is for the past 4 years. On behalf of the Islamic Community Center of Lancaster, I've been serving as a volunteer chaplain at Lancaster County Prison. So I visit Lancaster at least once a month, if not more. And I look forward to sharing more when we talk. Let me pass on to Eric.
Yeah, I was waiting patiently as if, they probably forgot about me, but I'm here. I connected earlier. My name is Eric Eddy. I'm the Executive Director of the Coalition of African Communities in Philadelphia. It is always a pleasure to be meeting with founders, to be here, especially in this era. We talk about, we're BIPOC, we're Black-led organization. So it is a huge responsibility to take and being here, but we'll hear from me shortly. Thank you.
I think Desi is maybe our last person who hasn't introduced themselves.
Pass it to Desi then.
Thanks, Eric. My name is Desi Burnett. I'm a statewide coordinator with a group called MILPA, which stands for the Movement of Immigrant Leaders in Pennsylvania. I'm a granddaughter of immigrants from Yemen and from Mexico. And MILPA is a statewide network of families that fights for the human rights of everybody, regardless of our immigration status. We are organizing in Harrisburg, Chambersburg, and Lancaster County, and Delaware County, and Philadelphia counties. We're also one of the founding organizations of the Driving PA Forward Coalition, which is an effort to change Pennsylvania state law to allow everyone to get a driver's license regardless of immigration status. And I'm very happy to be here today.
Did we hear from Kim yet?
Hey all, I'm Kim Shorter. I'm COO at the Lancaster County Community Foundation. Like others here, just excited to be on the call, learning more this morning. Yeah, so thanks.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Yeah, we've got a nice group here today, and I know the Lancaster Community Foundation is well represented, and it's also great to see some other folks doing work in the community and other funders from Lancaster County. So, and Berks as well. So thank you so much for attending, for being here. I'm going to turn things over now to Sundrop Carter. She's the executive director currently. Not for a whole lot longer, but currently at PIC. And yeah, she's going to take over from here. And I know they have a great presentation. She and Saida have a great presentation in store for us. So take it away, Sundrop.
Great. Thank you so much, Dave. Yes, so as I said, I am executive director of the Pennsylvania Immigration and Citizenship Coalition. We are a statewide advocacy coalition with member organizations across Pennsylvania that range from small grassroots community-led organizations all the way up to large service providers, faith-based groups, and labor organizations. And PIC is really, our mission is to advocate for pro-immigrant policies at the local, state, and federal levels. And this advocacy work is supported by, we do civic engagement where we register new citizens to vote and educate them about how to participate in the electoral process. We have a capacity building program where we provide trainings and leadership development with young people, as well as trainings for, immigrant leaders and allies across the state. And then finally, we coordinate PA is Ready. PA is Ready is a participatory grant-making fund that was created in 2014. At that time, President Obama had announced a potential new form of relief called the DAPA, the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans, which would have potentially provided access to work authorization and protections from deportation for close to 60,000 people in Pennsylvania and millions of people nationwide. PA is Ready was formed because we recognized that no individual organization alone was going to be able to meet the need of our communities if DAPA, came into reality, and that we needed to figure out a way to both collaborate as organizations as well as increase the amount of resources coming into our movement. And so since then, PA is Ready is as a participatory fund means that our network partners, which is groups like the folks that are on the call today, along with about 25 others, make all of the decisions about what are the priorities of PA is Ready, what kind of projects will be funded, and then actually make the grant making decisions. And Saida is going to share more details about PA is Ready later, but that's just a kind of a brief overview of who we are. So I'm just going to dive into, I think, the overview piece. So we just wanted to start just with 2 slides of Immigration 101. Which is just to make sure that everyone is, has a basic understanding of our immigration system, which is very complicated. So this is a simplified version of how do you become a citizen of the US. There's basically 5 paths if you want to become a citizen. One is a family relationship, which has a cap of about 480,000 people a year can become citizens through the family relationship. There's a lot of preference categories and priority dates. So if you're from a country like Mexico, your date based on family relationships, it could literally take you 20 years to gain citizenship from the date your family member files that first piece of paperwork to the day you walk into a USCIS office and get sworn in as a US citizen. Employment is another path. Again, there's a cap of 180,000 people a year. There's preference category. There's also preference categories and priority dates, and obviously requires an employer who's willing to do the process and you work in a field that qualifies as covered employment. The third way is humanitarian. So that is asylees, which are people who present themselves at the border, whether that's the physical border or at an airport, saying, I'm in danger in my home country. I am here to seek asylum. or refugees, which are people who get processed through the refugee process. So they are folks who are, they do their entire process somewhere else, usually in a refugee camp or something else. And then once they've been completely vetted and processed, then they come to the United States. There are also a hodgepodge of visas. So if you are in the United States and are a victim of trafficking or certain types of crimes, you can potentially get a visa that will put you on the path to citizenship. There's the diversity visa program, which was created to correct some of the race-based issues around exclusions in our immigration system. So that admits about 55,000 people a year. And again, was to help correct some of the problems in our immigration system. It did not do a very good job at fixing those problems and is now its own problem. And then finally, if you're really wealthy, you can buy a green card, basically. If you invest over $500,000 and will be providing a certain number of jobs, you can get an investor visa. So the very wealthy can buy themselves, and there isn't currently a cap. There's just, maybe not enough wealthy people to warrant putting a cap on that. And then obviously there are people who enter the country unauthorized. And so those are the folks that we call undocumented immigrants that enter the country without authorization or enter the country on some sort of temporary visa and just stay beyond that expiration date. Do you want to go to the next slide? And so there are a lot of people who just have no path to permanent residency. So when you hear someone say, why don't they just get in line? Anyone on this slide, there is no line for them to get into. So if you're in the US as a tourist or a student or another non-immigrant temporary visa, you can't just transfer that to an immigration status. So if you come to the US as a student and decide you really love the US, you want to get a job here, whatever, you have to go back to the previous slide and figure out, is there one of those pathways would apply to you? And the answer is probably no. There are a selection of employment visas that are just temporary and will never lead you to citizenship. Then there are, which you've probably all heard of in the news, TPS, Temporary Protected Status, or DACA, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, which are not technically immigration statuses. They are just provide temporary work authorization and a temporary deferral of deportation. They do not provide any sort of immigration status and do not confer any eventual pathway to a green card or citizenship. And then there are sort of undocumented folks who don't have access to any of that, right? They can't even get temporary protected status or DACA. They're just undocumented and have no opportunities to gain citizenship unless Congress changes their policies. So given all of that context, let's talk about who immigrants are in Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania, we're a state of about 13 million people. Our foreign-born population is about 800,000. Of our foreign-born population in Pennsylvania, about half of those folks are naturalized citizens. So they have gone through the process, had a pathway and naturalized and are now US citizens. Of the remaining roughly 50%, about a third of those are green card holders and either aren't eligible yet to become US citizens because you have to have a green card for a certain number of years before you can naturalize, or just haven't chosen to take that final step of going from green card holder to US citizen. About a third of the folks are just immigrants, authorized immigrants, but they have one of those temporary statuses like a student, work, etc., that doesn't lead to citizenship. And then about a third are undocumented, right? And that includes folks who have DACA or temporary work authorization, but they're undocumented and have no current path to citizenship. Next slide. So when we look at where people are in Pennsylvania, unsurprisingly, the majority of immigrants live in sort of the 5-county Southeast Pennsylvania. I say unsurprising because the majority of human beings in Pennsylvania live in Southeast Pennsylvania, and immigrants as people live where people live. The next And we do here have sort of a comparison of undocumented and citizenship eligible. So South Central, which is kind of the region we're all from, of like Lancaster, York, Harrisburg, Adams, Franklin counties, it has slightly larger percentage of undocumented community, mostly due to the agricultural. There's a lot of undocumented folks who work in agriculture. And then the Northeast, sort of the Scranton area, is like the next largest, and Southwest. And other is, you know, Erie, Central Pennsylvania, has a pretty negligible number of immigrants. When we look at who who immigrants are and like the countries of origin, you know, Pennsylvania is a much more diverse immigrant community than certainly what the national narrative is around who immigrants are in this country, and much more diverse than a lot of other states that immigration is a big issue, like California or Florida. API immigrants are actually the largest percentage of immigrants in the state, very closely followed by Central and South Americans. And then we have about 10% of our immigrant community are from Africa, and about 15% European. Obviously, there are other parts. This is a very simplified definition of the world. But just to give you a rough sense that when we think about who immigrants are in Pennsylvania, if your default idea of who an immigrant in Pennsylvania is a, you know, an immigrant from Mexico or from Central or South America, you're missing about 2/3 of the immigrants in the state. Next slide. Just to, oh, go back. Just another rough, just thinking about where undocumented immigrants, depending on how you absorb information. Again, the majority of undocumented folks are in, this map actually includes Lancaster into the Southeast Pennsylvania. But you can see that, you know, again, kind of Southeast Pennsylvania, Southwest, and sort of the southern half of Pennsylvania is the majority of immigrant communities kind of live in this bottom south half of Pennsylvania. The northern half of the state is, well, fewer people in general, and thus fewer immigrants. Next slide. Here's just a little bit of breakdown of by county. I do just want to, I usually give this caveat at the beginning of the data, but just a caveat on data. All of this data is imperfect. Census data is notoriously bad at counting, particularly undocumented immigrants, but immigrants in general. As we've all been hearing lately, the 2020 census had a lot of issues. We'll be seeing what the 2020 census data is like, but all of the data we're sharing today is based on models from the 2010 census, because that's the most recent census where the data is available, and on the annual American Family Services, whatever, I always get the acronym wrong, the annual survey. So these are always, you know, take a grain of salt. This is rough numbers. Never view these as 100% accurate, because data around immigrants is never 100% accurate. So you can see, you know, just a overview of the percentage of the population that are foreign born. Obviously Pennsylvania is high, but as you can see, Dauphin and Cumberland County have very, you know, relatively speaking, high percentages of foreign born folks. Next slide. We'll be sharing these slides out, so you don't worry about memorizing this. I think it's just good to note that Latino and Asian communities are the fastest growing communities in the state, and that includes in Central Pennsylvania. When you think about who are the fastest growing communities, you should be thinking about Latino and Asian communities when you're thinking about the growth in the region. In most parts of Pennsylvania, the white community is shrinking, and Latino, Asian, and Black, African American communities are growing. Particularly in Central Pennsylvania, Latino and Asians are growing very quickly. Next slide. Another important thing to think about with immigration is all our families are mixed status families. And that just means that different every person in the family might have a different immigration status, you know, US citizen children with undocumented parents, or you know, one parent has a green card and one's undocumented and the kids have DACA, right? Like when we talk about immigration, it's always a complicated picture. And so if you're excluding undocumented folks from programs, you're often excluding an entire family, not just that individual. And by excluding people based upon immigration status, you're not just impacting that individual, you're impacting their entire family and community, because their family is mixed status and their community is mixed status. Next slide. Just a little, I know that a lot of folks are particularly concerned with, you know, helping low income and working poor folks. This just kind of gives a rough overview of, based on country of origin, just kind of poverty levels in Pennsylvania. We're going to go through these really quickly. And then finally, you know, under COVID, we've been talking a lot about essential workers and who are essential workers, and the fact that, you know, so many immigrant families are essential workers. And so what this slide shows you for Pennsylvania, so the orange bar is the percent of foreign-born workers who work in that industry. So roughly 2% of foreign-born workers in Pennsylvania work in agriculture. 25% of foreign-born workers in Pennsylvania work in education, healthcare, and social assistance. So that's, you know, nurses, teachers, etc. The blue bar is the percent of workers overall who are foreign-born. So you can see that 11% of agricultural workers are immigrants, right? You know, about 8% of workers in education and healthcare social assistance are immigrants. 7% of our construction workers are immigrants. So just as you know, when we're talking about COVID relief and essential workers, we have to be talking about immigrants because they are a significant percentage of essential industries. And I think that is it. So for the next section of our agenda, we're going to be asking all of our guest speakers to talk a little bit about some of the challenges that they're seeing in their communities and specific issues that are facing the communities they work with and how they're working to address it. So first off, I'm going to hand it off to Megan from Make the Road, Pennsylvania.
Thank you. So I only have 5 minutes and I'm a Latina. Like, I start talking very fast. So if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. My name is Megan Direna. I am the Executive Director of Make the Road Pennsylvania. Our organization builds power for justice in Latinx and immigrant communities and working class communities of color. And we really believe in the members being the community members being the ones that truly understand like what is wrong with their communities and how to fix it. Like, they have the power and the knowledge to do that, and we just provide guidance. And I say this because it really led into what we had to do in this past year, now year and a half, where we went from having weekly committee meetings and being in person with each other and working on specific campaigns, to realizing that we needed to do so much more that we did not know how to do, and we needed to figure out how to do it overnight. So when COVID first hit and the pandemic first started being something that we realized was really going to affect our communities, we tried to figure out how we can do some version of direct services with our members. So our organization is grassroots only. We have not done direct services with our folks. And we knew we were advocating, and we talked to a lot of elected officials to make sure that immigrants, undocumented folks, everybody, refugees were going to be included in any bill that passed. But we were also preparing for the worst because we know our folks are always left behind. So we tried to figure out how we were going to provide any kind of assistance to our members, to folks that were specifically excluded from federal aid. and working with these communities and my own community to identify what actually was needed from us in the hardest moments of their lives, and the hardest moments of my staff's lives. Our staff is from the community itself. Our canvassers are from the community. Our organizers are from the community. I'm from Allentown. Like, we all came up from the ground, from being members. So they were just as impacted. They were also getting sick. Our members were getting sick. People were passing away. And we needed to figure out how to get basic needs met for our members. So food, water, and shelter. How are we going to do that? And because a lot of folks were undocumented, they were facing even more issues with the eviction moratorium. It took me all year to learn how to say moratorium, so I'm very proud of that. Anyway, our members were facing, like, they knew that they were not allowed to get kicked out, but the people they were renting from did not care because they knew they were undocumented. So we had to figure out how to provide Know Your Right workshops for tenants. And Pennsylvania has the worst housing, has no housing. It does not protect tenants at all. We do not protect tenants in Pennsylvania, especially undocumented ones. And so we had to do some version of Know Your Right so folks can know who they had to call if their landlord was threatening them, how we can mobilize a rapid emergency action so that they can stay in their homes. And in the meanwhile, we were trying to provide the same kind of resources. So we knew that there was rent relief applications that could be filled out, but there was no outreach done by the state or the counties. And not only did they not do the outreach, but they didn't have enough people that spoke different languages. So they barely spoke Spanish, and they definitely didn't speak any other language. So that became a very difficult portion of how to figure out what we needed to do as an organization to help folks apply for rent relief, even though we didn't necessarily understand how to go through the application. So we had to figure out how to go through the application so that we could provide assistance to our members. So again, these two things, like trying to figure out how to mobilize in those moments and also provide direct assistance with the Solidarity Fund and help people apply for rent relief, was just new things for us that we didn't, the mobilization was something that we have done in the past, but the Solidarity Fund, which is the direct cash assistance to our members that were excluded from the federal stimulus package, is what we were trying to figure out how to navigate. And as Sandra mentioned, like, our Latino communities are one of the quickest growing communities in Pennsylvania. And we saw that even with this moment that happened, a lot of our friends and family from Make New York, our sister organization, started leaving New York. They were fleeing New York and coming to Pennsylvania and coming to like Lehigh Valley, Lehigh County, Berks County, and Philadelphia to leave New York because New York was so terrible. So we had folks coming from Queens, from Bronx, where there was a lot of impacts because of COVID. And people just needed to get away. So we had to figure out how to provide assistance for these folks, keep them close to us because they were already part of the Make the Road family, and we wanted to keep them or give them any kind of safety because they felt very unsafe in those moments. We mobilized to force employers to implement safety precautions for their employees. There was no, again, just like the tenants, there was no worker safety in warehouses and meat packing plants, in any agricultural work. So we hosted Know Your Rights workshops for folks to understand what are their rights when they're in the workforce, but then also mobilize rapid actions so that we can force the employers to keep them safe. And we started, and like I said, we started a Solidarity Fund where we were able to help over 200 families and even more individuals with direct cash assistance that were not included in the federal aid. So these are all the mixed status undocumented folks. And we have been helping our members fill out rent relief applications. So we started going back into our offices to meet by appointment to try to keep it as safe as possible, of course, to meet our members, any community members, to help them fill out their rent relief applications, and have started talking to elected officials to push the path to citizenship for essential workers. So I'll leave it there. I'm sorry if I spoke too fast. And thank you.
Thank you so much, Megan. And like I said in the chat, there will be, please feel free to put any questions you have for any of our speakers in the chat, and we will be pausing along the way to let you ask questions as well. So next, I'm going to hand it off to Desi from the Movement of Immigrant Leaders in Pennsylvania, or MILPA. Desi, you want to take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Sandra. Again, my name is Desi Burnett. I'm with Movement of Immigrant Leaders in Pennsylvania, or MILPA. And I think that we really wanted to use this time to talk about some of the state fights that we have going on in Pennsylvania, not just with MILPA, but across all of immigrant communities, and also the federal efforts that we're engaged in. And I mentioned in our introduction that MILPA is one of the founding organizations we really came out of an effort to change the law to allow folks to get a driver's license regardless of immigration status. Prior to 2002, in the state of Pennsylvania, folks were able to get a driver's license using what's called a individual tax ID number, or ITIN, which people use to pay taxes if you don't have a social security number. That law changed in 2002, and in 2009, about 10,000 people had their licenses canceled almost overnight in the course of a few months. And that's really when we began, communities across Pennsylvania began this effort. And so, through this effort to change the law, when we began, people were like, you live in Pennsylvania, right? We were like, yeah, we think we know, we live here. But there was a lot of skepticism, a lot of kind of pushback about what immigrant communities, particularly in this case, mixed status and undocumented families, what kind of power we really had to meet this really important need. Without a driver's license, people think, oh, a driver's license is just driver's license. People can't get into their children's schools. They can't get into hospitals if their children are in themselves, if they need care, can't get vaccines right now in some cases. And it's just critical for meeting basic needs like work, housing. And there was a lot of questioning of whether immigrants really had power in this state. And we really knew that we did, and it was a process of how do we organize that power. Sandra mentioned in the beginning a lot about agricultural workers in our state. The state legislature is a Republican legislature, but many of the folks we've spoken to understand the role of undocumented labor in the core industries in their district, whether it be meat packing, fruit packing, or mushrooms, dairy, many of these agricultural, much of this agricultural work. 1 out of 2, so half of hired work in the United States in the agriculture sector is undocumented. Half. Everyone knows it. It's how we eat. It's how we survive. Yet these same workers are, subject to deportation to get to their essential jobs. These same workers are not afforded basic dignified salaries or health care. And so for us, it's really been a process of how do we know we have power in this state. Our members are holding up one of the largest industries and most important for our sustenance as people. But how do we, but yet we're told we don't have power to get something so basic as a driver's license. So for us, the process of bringing our people together, doing the education, doing the organizing, and making demands for what we need is really what MILPA has been doing, what Make the Road, what all of the organizations that are part of PIC, that are organizing organizations, that's what we are doing. And that's what's so critical to be able to move the needle on these. So in terms of driver's licenses, we were able to introduce legislation this session. We have 2 Republicans who are sponsors of the legislation. And we're really hopeful that this session we can get this effort through so that folks have this. But the real win for us is how do we organize ourselves as community members, as families, and as organizations to really wield the power we know that our communities have. And along with driver's licenses, this year has been very critical at the state level. Megan mentioned the housing crisis that so many people in the state are facing. There's been efforts around counseling rents and really dealing with how do we deal with the mass number of people that are going to be facing eviction. that we've been dealing with at the state level. The state budget process is very critical for all of our people because of what Sandra kind of showed through the statistics. Many of our folks are poor, low income, low wealth, and efforts for tuition equity to ensure that no matter your immigration status, that you will have the same right to get an education, a higher education. Those are some of the efforts that we've been involved with at the state level. And then federally right now, there's a lot of changes that have happened since the administration came in. We're 100 days out. We're right about 100 days out from the first 100 days of the Biden administration. And there's a really large push right now to ensure that undocumented folks are going to have a pathway to citizenship, among many other efforts. And that's one of the big efforts that we're involved in right now, and it's going to be critical. It's critical that we approach it from a standpoint, not just of how do we help industry, how do we make sure the ag industry or the industries that depend on immigrants are okay. We have to approach it from a place of how do we ensure that the humanity and dignity of every person that is part of our communities is okay. So that's why we're calling on the Congress to pass an immigration reform with a path to citizenship for all 11 million, not a section, not only these folks or those folks, but all 11 million undocumented in this country. And that's how folks are going to be able to have some permanent protections from deportation and family separation. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Desi. So next, I am going to hand off to Amit from CARE Philadelphia. Amit, are you?
Hello?
Yep.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for this and for the opportunity to talk about our work. Like I mentioned, I spent a good amount of time in Lancaster community. So again, I'll talk you through some of our work. We are a civil rights and advocacy organization. At our office, we do not do immigration law, but a major number of inquiries that we receive are related to immigration. And so we go to our partners at HIAS, at National Youth Service Center and other partners to resolve those issues. And I wanted to give just a brief overview of the Muslim landscape in Pennsylvania and talk about our work in that regard. Obviously, like Sandra, I need to mention that no data is perfect. And then the other thing to note when we are talking about religion and religious identity is to note that not every individual whose name is Ahmed, like me, is necessarily a Muslim. Not every person that we work with necessarily is someone who self-identifies as a religious person or attends mosques. On the left-hand side, you see a distribution of mosques in the Southeast Pennsylvania region. As you can see, Lancaster is there, Reading is there, and Allentown is there. And then, of course, there are communities in Harrisburg and in Pittsburgh area and in Erie as well. Now, Muslim Americans make about 1% or less of the Pennsylvania population, even though Philadelphia region especially is home to a large population. Next slide, please. And I'm using Pew Research Center's data today to talk about numbers. According to 2017 numbers, Muslim Americans are at 3.45 million nationally, making about 1% of the population. But if Pew projections are correct, that number will increase by 2050 to become about 2.1% of the population. Obviously, during the last administration, we saw some immigration barriers to Muslim identity and the Muslim ban. So that may have shifted things slightly, but in general, that is what we can mention. I should note that in 2009, President Obama, when he was speaking in Cairo, he noted the 6 to 9 million Muslim American numbers, which is mostly what you will find community members side rather than the 3.45 number, but we are going by that. Next slide, please. So importantly, and in following up with my colleagues and what they said, the community is internally diverse. No single country of origin is more than 15% of the foreign-born US Muslims, right? So we need to emphasize that about 30% of American Muslims are African American Muslims, been here for generations. So one stereotype we often face is that all Muslims are immigrants, and that is not the case. But of course, about 60% of the population is immigrants, and in that immigration you can see that people come from different backgrounds, and of course census data doesn't always capture this diversity, right? Some folks not having their own boxes and categories lead some of them to choose the white category as well. But to talk about our communities here in Pennsylvania, we have significant portion of AAPI Muslim communities from both the subcontinent, but also from Indonesia and from places like Sham, Thai Muslims and others. And then we have Middle Eastern Muslims and as well as a significant number of African immigrants who come from different countries to compose that structure. Many Muslim immigrants arrive in America after 2000, so 9/11 didn't stop Muslim immigration into the United States. That's something that we should note. To talk about Lancaster, for example, more specifically, of course, some of what's not captured here is, for example, in Lancaster, we have quite a number of Syrian refugee families, right? Like I mentioned in the beginning, I serve as the volunteer chaplain for Lancaster County Prison, and just last week, we had to take some headscarves for female Muslims in the prison, and a local Syrian refugee who had opened a tailor shop, did the sizing for us because there are specific dimension sizings in the prison. So the mosque communities work with different organizations. I'm sure some of you may have come across that work to make sure that these immigrants, find, a welcoming environment. At the same time, as PA is ready grant recipient, where we are currently leading our pilot projects in Harrisburg and in Allentown areas, we can say that, from school inclusion and equity to many other aspects of life, refugees and immigrants continue to face a great deal of discrimination. We can go to the next slide. One of the challenges that we also face is that, similar to the all Muslims are immigrants stereotype, there's this, the model minority myth is sometimes, applied to Muslim Americans as well. While, some, Muslim Americans have high incomes, a lot of the individuals, about 40% of the population live actually under $30,000 annual income level, which is a reality that we need to keep in mind. It's not all doctors, engineers as such. These individuals may be leading some of the most communities, but at large, we are looking at a much more diverse socioeconomic diversity, and that definitely impacts how folks have access to legal services, to many other issues. I myself am a green card holder, came as a graduate student, got green card through my wife, who is Turkish American, born, raised here. And I know how difficult and how stressful and how tasking that whole process of walking through immigration can be. We can move to the next slide. So looking at our own national data from this is also a little bit dated, but looking at this, we are seeing that anti-Muslim bias incidents increase every year, especially during presidential election years. We've seen this has become even more of a problem. Next slide, please. And these incidents, of course, includes a number of different types of incidents. Some of them is denial of religious accommodation. Others are hate crimes, employment discrimination, workplace discrimination, discrimination at the hands of law enforcement, whether that's FBI at the federal level or local law enforcement. To give you an example, recently we helped a family member who was just attacked by their neighbor's dog just because they were a brown individual. So these kind of incidents continue to impact the community. And I know I'm almost out of my time, but what I wanted to highlight is especially in regards to broader, structures of, how stereotypes are built. There's definitely a role in media coverage that we are trying to address. Media coverage around not only terrorist incidents, but also around immigration and painting of immigrants in a certain light. I think we have one more slide. Maybe not, but where I want to conclude is to highlight some of what we are hearing in our PA is Ready program, which is Somali immigrants and mostly Arab American immigrants that we are working with all report a level of bias that impact their lives in their schools, and at the same time also for parents who are engaging with school districts, they are seeing that as well. And what we are trying to do is to empower them to lead their own campaigns, their organizing campaigns, to advocate for what they find as issues of change in their school districts, so that there's a pipeline of leaders who know how to organize and advocate for themselves and who will navigate the civic processes in the United States properly, while adopting a language of organizing and a language of being able to advocate both for themselves and for others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ahmet. So we are gonna just pause for a few minutes. And if anyone has any questions, you can either put them in the chat, or if you want to ask the question, just unmute yourself. And we'll just pause here if anyone has questions about anything you've heard so far. And I will say immigration is a super complicated area of law and policy. There really is no such thing as a stupid question or a question that is too small. Even immigration attorneys who've practiced for 20 years run across things they're not familiar with. So if you're not doing this work every day, if you're confused or uncertain about something, it is likely other people on this call are as well. So please don't feel shy, even if it feels like a silly question, it's not.
I have a question, Sundrop, and I want to thank everyone who's spoken so far. The information you've provided is so compelling. And I wondered if this type of presentation or information sharing has been offered, say, during a town hall meeting in specific counties or communities. I think the general public, especially businesses, would learn so much about the details that you're sharing.
I will say PIC has done those kinds of presentations in the past, not necessarily at like city council hearings, but public presentations to different organizations. I will also just call on Megan and Desi, because I know Make the Road in Milpa does a lot of public education. Do either one of you want to share anything about in response?
Sure. I think that we do this as part of our education workshops with our members, and now we do it as a part of like our Facebook Lives and Instagram Lives because of the pandemic, and we provide some of it during our Know Your Rights workshops that are specific for allies. So we have a variety of series of Know Your Rights workshops, and one of them is for allies that want to protect folks, help protect folks. And we include information about like the population and different aspects of the presentation into that.
And for PIC, we do, on our website, we have a speaker request form that anyone is, because that's part of kind of our core work, is anyone can request speakers, and we'll figure out either a PIC staff person, or if it's a local event, we'll refer it to one of our member organizations in that area. So if you are interested in having someone come offer a presentation, there's a speaker request form on our website. And as long as you give enough warning, don't do it the day before. We ask for at least 2 weeks. We would be happy to help find someone who'd be available to come speak at a local event.
Yeah, that's.
So I'm going to hand it over to Annalisa to talk about the philanthropy landscape.
Great, thank you, Sundrop, and thank you again, everybody who's on the call today. So just, I wanted to introduce myself. I realized I didn't actually do this in the beginning. So I am a special initiatives consultant for the Philadelphia Foundation. So I am actually a consultant who works on behalf of the foundation for this particular project, for the PA is Ready project. I was director of grant making and special initiatives at the foundation until 2015. And that's really initially how I got involved in PA's Ready. We were approached along with a number of other funders about this work and how the immigrant serving organizations were coming together, both in southeastern Pennsylvania, but across the state. Because of that, the foundation basically applied for national funds and created a pooled fund to which other funders could contribute to the PA is Ready effort, so that it was a collaborative effort on behalf of PA is Ready. So we work very much in collaboration with PIC and PA is Ready in the network. And I will say that having been a part of this project for the last 5 years, I feel incredibly lucky to be able to be part of it, and grateful for the incredible learning that's come along with it for me personally, and also for the Philadelphia Foundation. You can move to the next slide, Sundrop. We wanted to share just a couple of pieces of information around the philanthropic landscape as it relates to immigrant and refugee funding for immigrants and refugees, both nationally and also locally in Pennsylvania. Folks on the call might be familiar with the National Committee for Responsive Philanthropy, which is a national organization that really looks at, they sort of serve as a watchdog group for philanthropy and ensuring that philanthropy is responsive to people and communities who have the least wealth and opportunity. So a couple of years ago, I think it was actually last year, they did a study that looked at the amount of philanthropic dollars, again, both across the country and also by state, that are dedicated to immigrants and refugees. And so I'm just going to share a couple of highlights from what they found. So between 2011 and 2015, barely 1% of all money granted by the 1,000 largest US foundations was intended to benefit immigrants and refugees. So barely 1%. So very small amount of money dedicated to these populations. Support for immigrant rights movement is concentrated in a small group of dedicated funders. So one of the things they found that was very interesting is that 2014, 2016, 11 foundations across the country were responsible for half of all pro-immigrant movement funding. So there's a small group of funders who are very supportive, but unfortunately it's a very small group that's providing most of the funding for this work. Funding for the pro-immigrant movement has really skewed towards national legal and policy organizations. So that was the other key takeaway for them, was that grassroots organizations, and even in the face of all of the dramatic policy changes from 2016 and on, that while additional money was given, there was money given to pro-immigrant movement organizations. It was mostly these large organizations and not the grassroots organizations that a lot of the folks that you just heard from today, that are often the ones that are led by folks of color, and typically don't have as much of the relationship with foundations and the networks that connect to foundations and those dollars. There's lots of research that sort of has looked at this question of organizations that are white-led versus organizations that are led by folks of color, and the disparities that exist across philanthropy between those two groups. In 2016, approximately 20 million in institutional philanthropic dollars supported extremist anti-immigrant organizations, including those that are classified as hate groups by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And wanted to just highlight that, because I think part of what that speaks to is that philanthropic organizations that care about immigrants and refugees they're being outpaced by philanthropy that is sort of supporting anti-immigrant groups, and I think that's a really important piece to note. So it means that we're losing, right? Philanthropy is losing on this front because there is not nearly enough that is going to the pro-immigrant movement work. You can move to the next slide, Sandra. And that was national. In Pennsylvania, they looked at specifically, again, the sort of what was happening in Pennsylvania on the fundraising or funding landscape. And in Pennsylvania, it was actually less than the national numbers. So less than 0.8% of all local funding in Pennsylvania benefits the immigrant and refugee communities. And it's less than 0.2% that benefits the pro-immigrant movement. So the distinction there being, movement work versus mostly service-related work for immigrant organizations. Immigrants make up 6% of Pennsylvania's total population. So again, the amount of dollars that are being given to immigrant and refugee communities is far below that. So local to local foundation funding was $5 billion in 2012 and to 2016, and only $2 billion in 2017, 2018. So again, despite the policy changes in the policy environment, we were actually seeing a decrease in funding to immigrants and refugees during that time. Again, local funding to benefit immigrants and refugees increased from 0.6 in 2012 to 2016 to 0.8% in 2017 and 18. So again, very, very incremental increase given the policy environment. And local funding for the pro-immigrant, pro-refugee movement made up about 0.1% of local funding in 2012 to 2016. It almost doubled to 0.2% in 2017, 2018. So again, we're talking about very, very small numbers going to the pro-immigrant movement work. Again, if you contrast that with what's being funded to support anti-immigrant movements, it's dramatic. And there's a lot that needs to happen to shift that. So one of the things, you can move to the next slide, Sandra, that we are trying to challenge philanthropy across the state is, so number one, just wanted to share a couple of messages. NCRP actually has very strong relationships with community-based organizations across the states. And so they compiled some key pieces, things that leaders across the United States are asking of philanthropy. And so just wanted to share some of what they heard. One is, of course, this is not a new message, but give unrestricted multi-year support to base building groups that are accountable to the affected communities, and especially at state and local levels. So again, this idea of really supporting grassroots, community-led organizations that are really closest to the work. Fund community organizing and direct services, not one or the other. They're both important, and so it's not either or. Helping grantees to access 501c4 funds to give them more tools. And you heard Desi talk a little bit about the work that they are doing at the state level around driver's licenses. I think one of the things that we have found with funders, backing away from anything that feels like are we allowed to legally, fund these things? And I think there's a lot of misinformation around what funders are able to give to. And certainly the work that Desi does at MILPA does not cross that line into lobbying. So the other piece is just collaborate with other funders and across movements, which I think is part of what we're talking about today. And then finally, support the movement beyond the grant dollars. So there's lots of ways that funders can contribute to this work that doesn't just look like giving dollars. And you all are aware, sort of capacity building, supporting capacity building, supporting immigrant leaders in their leadership work, supporting the organizations that they're serving. And then finally, using the platform that philanthropy has in order to lift up some of the needs and the issues that these communities are addressing. Philanthropy has an incredible audience, right? Has an incredible privilege an ability to reach folks that grassroots organizations cannot. And so using that voice, and I think some funders are increasingly doing that as a way of lifting up the needs. So I think one of the things I did want to share that we are trying to, a message that we're trying to share with folks is that, I mean, we want to challenge funders in the state. And I would say the Philadelphia Foundation has done a lot of increased giving to immigrants and refugees in the last number of years. And part of that has happened through PA is Ready. Part of it has also happened through direct giving to organizations like MILPA and CARE and the others that you heard from today. And so I guess our challenge is to ask that philanthropy try to get up to at least 1% of all giving going to immigrants and refugees serving organizations, the pro-immigrant movement work. That would be a huge increase. It's still very far below what it needs to be if you think about the overall population. But that's really our challenge, is to try to increase the overall amount of dollars that are going to pro-immigrant work. And I think with that, actually, let me just stop. And if folks have questions, I'm not sure if there are questions that came through in the chat.
I think we're just going to plow ahead because we are running way behind on our agenda. And so please put questions in the chat and we'll hopefully have a few minutes at the end. But I think we're just going to.
Great, go for it. So I think next up is Saida Rashid, who is the resource director at PIC. And I'm gonna pass it to you, Saida.
Thank you. So because of time, I'll go into pretty quickly about a couple of the statewide projects that we that are working to did this immigrant refugee movement work. And so one of them, I'll go into a little bit more later, which is the PA is Ready. And then there's also this thing called the PIFUP, which is a PA Immigrant Family Unity Project. Their goals are pretty specific and they have a separate national fund dedicated to achieving universal representation for immigrant detainees in PA. The PA is Ready is one that we're highlighting at the moment. So it's a participatory community-led grant-making fund, and it is rooted in serving diverse immigrant refugee communities. So the model relies heavily on collaboration and close partnership between grant makers as well as grassroots organizations. And then one of the biggest, the key point of the PA is Ready is that the immigrants and refugees should have a voice in creating and leading solutions for the communities, including deciding the allocation of resources. So it's been around for 5 years, since 2016, and we have leveraged a total of 1.3 million to 34 organizations. So going into a little bit about the framework, as you can see here, these are some of the priorities that our network partners have actually chosen. So priorities are the leadership development and organizational capacity building, which is the question about how do we develop active leaders within the immigrant and refugee communities and build strong organizations. We also have community-based immigration services, and these are building statewide capacity to provide immigration assistance. This is where we also include know your rights trainings, naturalization applications, as well as legal consultation. There's also the enforcement resistance work, which is building capacity to engage community-based responses to heightened immigrant enforcement. And then lastly, we have the PIFUP, which is a little bit more into how do we respond to immigrant detainees and provide universal legal representation. So the entire, the model, what makes it pretty unique is that there's a strong collaboration between the community-based organization and the legal service providers. And the belief is that the community-based organizations are the ones who are the trusted voices in the community, right? Are the first places that community members go to with questions for support, for basic needs, as well as help with legal services. And then the legal service providers are the ones who have the expertise and the knowledge to assist with applications. So this model is also one where community-based organization and legal service organization join together in this larger vision that as a whole, we're able to build safe and welcoming communities for all residents and all immigrants. So going into a little bit about the fund structure is that the way it works is that the network partners are the ones who are choosing and deciding on the priorities, and the national and local funders are contributing funds into this pool fund. And once it goes into the pool funds, the grant making committee is the one that facilitates the process of the grant making. And the way it works is that we have 5 elected members chosen by the network partners who are from the organizations. We also have a couple of funder representatives as well as a PIC coordinator. And then through the grant making process, that's when the money is distributed to organizations through which you also provide support during the entire year in terms of like how do we build capacity in the way that was like stated and the way that the vision is in our framework. And then going back to a little bit about the results and some of the achievements we've had going into last year's, we have received over proposals for over $600,000, and we've been able to give out a little more than 200,000. And when you look at the graphics over here, these are some of the ways that the distributions have been by each of the counties, and over here are a little bit more around what are the numbers actually looks like when it comes to. So a lot of these, it will be sent in the slides when we move them up. When we send them to you afterwards, they're going to look into a little bit more. And so with that said, I'm going to pass it to Eric, who's going to be speaking a little bit more about how the PAs really have impacted the AFRICOM as well as African American communities.
All right, thank you, Saida. I think I have one of the quickest part in here in terms of representing an organization that has benefited from the grant-making model that PAs really is promoting. And I want to say, first of all, that we are very thankful that we joined not only the PAs really network, but the PIC network itself. There are different ways we can measure the impact of this grant-making model and the PAs really on grassroots organizations like AFRICOM. The beauty about AFRICOM is we are 100% Black-led, and about 95% of our services are also geared towards those African and Caribbean immigrants and refugees in the greater Philadelphia area. One of the things that I want to stress is as often we talk about capacity building, it comes with knowledge. It comes with learning more tools for advocacy, networking, and all that. But I think what I want to insist more on is the monetary side of this capacity building. You can imagine that when I took over AFRICOM as the executive director in 2014, we were more of a volunteer-funded organization. So the resources were not really what they are today in terms of running and operating an organization with such a magnitude. We do operate as a coalition of grassroots organizations, including faith-based and even small businesses as well in Philadelphia preeminently. So what happened is when I took over, of course, we with a new board, a new orientation, and new strategies, decided to expand our grant-making capacities. It was very frustrating in the first 2 years to know that you can write grant after grant to foundations and be denied denials after denials. So the connection with PA is ready, with PIC, and then with PA is ready, gave us our first grant. What I want you to stress on that is the confidence that he rebuilt in me personally as the executive director, but also in the organization, knowing that what the work that we are doing is valuable, it is needed in the community. So the first thing in here, the first impact has been reinstating or restoring the confidence in the work that we are doing. The second thing is knowledge. Of course, receiving a grant, even from a PA is ready, leads to accountability. How to report and make sure that you are sticking to what the funders want it was part of what we also gained and the impact that the PA's really grant brought to AFRICOM. In terms of the funds themselves, over the past 5 years now, AFRICOM has consistently received a portion of the PA's ready to support our program. Number one, with this consistent funding, we've been able to solidify or consolidate our immigration and legal assistance program for individuals. And of course, working in partnership with the National T-Service Center, we ended up creating a channel that facilitates immigrants access to legal, adequate, I would say, and quality service, legal representation. One of the first pilot, should I say, referrals, about 2 or 3 years ago, actually came from AFRICOM. And it ended up being the face of that program when this family, no access, no legal access was referred to the National T-Service Center. And of course, they were able to get their status today, get the son back from the child's services, who has custody of the child for so many things I don't want to get into. But that family get back on their feet, and today they are thriving. The child is in school, the mother is working, and of course the gentleman is also taking some classes to get their life together. The other aspect is, of course, the budget. AFRICOM has been able to, because of because of the PA's Ready Fund, we have been able to consolidate and have a steady budget, which is, of course, we're growing and growing. And of course, with a growing budget, we do also have a growing staff. In 2014, we were 100%, volunteer-led. In 2021, we have 3 staff plus some volunteers. But now those volunteers are not just volunteers, but they are interns from Westchester University that has trusted us over the past 3 years now to use AFRICOM as a placement site for their candidates to the degree of social work. So you can track all these things. Another thing I want to insist on is how the PA's Ready Fund not only provided, some grant money, but also allowed us to connect with other funders. Particularly, I want to mention the Doughty Foundation. The office where I'm sitting, where we are today, where we rented from our partner, Southwest Tennessee, it was made possible because of the connection that we have with the Doughty Foundation. We were invited to a forum as a PA's Ready grantee, and we made that connection in there. And that connection has allowed us to increase our capacity again in terms of location, and it's been on since then. Another funder is the Samuel Fells Fund. Of course, the PA's Ready and our executive director also vouch for AFRICOM. We always, we need referral. It has also allowed us to continue to have. So I can confidently tell you that, we are still growing, and we are at the point where if in 2014, AFRICOM has less than $10,000 in its account, today, we have an operating budget of about $300,000, which is also growing. Another impact I want to mention very quickly is how our work itself, has been expanding. Earlier, I told you that, AFRICOM has worked essentially in the Philadelphia area. As of last year, we have, of course, our community organizers invested energy and time in Westchester, in the Harrisburg area. And this year, we are also expanding to Pittsburgh. Why? Because of our hair breeding campaign. The natural hair breeding campaign is actually a campaign to push the PA legislature to repeal the specialty license that natural hair breeders have to have after completing over 300 hours. The thing is that there is no school, there's barely any school in PA or in Philadelphia especially that will teach this art to those ladies who already mastered it. And we are hearing good news that new legislations, what will be introduced. And we are very confident that, maybe by the end of 2021, we'll have a good results on that. So last point I want to make is the replication of models. Another initiative that Africa has started to be more impactful on the grassroots organizations that are members of the coalition. We replicated the PA's Ready model. Basically, the fund that what we have received with some other funds that we were able to select a group of 10 grassroots organizations. Each of these grassroots organizations sending 2 representatives to participate to what we call the AFRICOM is Ready under the PA's Ready model. AFRICOM is Ready cohorts. And this cohort is going through some training. Matter of fact, we have our first legislative advocacy training coming up on Friday, April the 30th. So in conclusion, I want to leave you with this message that for AFRICOM, very definitely, and people know me in the PA is Ready network, we have made ourselves the defender or this #1 supporters of a smaller grassroots organization that needs to be funded, because those grassroots organizations, because of their capacity sometimes, are excluded or they are easily bypassed by big funders. The way to go, therefore, is to continue to support this participatory grant-making model that we are presenting to you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Eric. And I always love listening to Eric speak because he's so eloquent and passionate about PA's Ready, which is just really great to hear the impact that this has all had. We want to wrap because we know we're at 11:29, but I guess I wanted to wrap up by just saying, I guess our invitation to folks on the call today is really to 2 things. One is to support both the individual organizations that you've heard from today, and to support the pooled fund, the PA's Ready pooled fund at the Philadelphia Foundation. It's very easy to give to the pooled fund. And I was really glad to see that there are donor advised fund, sort of donor services folks on the call today. One of our biggest supporters of PA's Ready is a donor advised fund holder at the Philadelphia Foundation who gives $150,000 a year towards this project. We would not be able to do this without her. And so we're just really grateful to have all of you on here. And I guess one thing I wanted to just share personally is that one of the reasons that I believe so deeply in this project is because of the way that I think it turns philanthropy on its head, right? Putting decision-making power in the hands of the folks who are closest to work. So I think there's this sort of thing, there's a representative who shared this idea that people who are closest to the pain should be the ones who are closest to the power, right? And to me, that is really fundamentally where philanthropy should be. That as we think about the way to do philanthropy well and the way to really shift the dynamics that exist, it's really to give decision-making power to folks who are closest to the work and who really know what the needs are. So we will be sharing some materials, follow-up materials with all of you. So we'll share both the slides, and then we also have some information about PA's Ready to the extent that folks want to know how to give to the PA's Ready Fund, and then information about each of the organizations that shared today. But we're sorry that we don't have a lot of time for questions because we're now at 11:31, but want to just really thank all of you for being part of this conversation today and your willingness to just hear what the needs are on the ground and your great questions. So thank you. I guess I'm passing it back to David. Do you want to close us out?
Yeah, we're past time, but yeah, I just want to echo Annalisa's thanks to everybody. This is really, really informative and just helpful to understand, how we can all support the needs of immigrants and refugees in our local communities and statewide. So thank you, Annalisa, for the initiative. Thank you, Saida and Sandra, and everybody who presented today. Just really, really grateful for all of you and all of the work that you do. So with that, yeah, we'll leave you and hope you have a great day. Enjoy the lovely weather. And yeah, we'll look forward to seeing your faces in person when things start to get a little bit back to quote normal. So thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, David. Thanks for hosting.
Sure.
Thank you.